All right, Carmen Bryan.
Hey Vlad, thank you for having me.
Welcome to Vlad TV.
Thank you, it's a pleasure to be here.
So we're going to get into the whole story, but I kind of want to build a timeline in
Okay.
terms of how it all happens. So you grew up in New York,
Queens, yes.
in Queens,
Jamaica.
Jamaica, Queens. Okay. And did you want to get into the music industry early on, or how did that kind of come about?
Honestly, music has always been a part of my life. My mom plays the violin, the piano. My brother plays the piano, the drums. I actually play the piano. So I grew up in a musical household. My mom she's a doctor of education, but she's like super musical. She's like a genius, so to speak. She sings, she dances. So she was the one that actually introduced my brother and I to music, to using yourself as a tool, to being creative. And she also used those classes and those lessons to kind of like keep us off the streets and out of the park and give us something productive and creative to do. And that was something that we enjoyed. So I actually played the piano. I started singing at a very young age. My brother's a producer now. My mom went off to continue teaching, and she still plays the piano, she still sings, she still plays the violin, but music has always been a part of my life.
Okay. Now, at the point that you first met Nas, were you involved in the music industry at all, or just a fan of it?
Well, when I met Nas, actually I met Nas through my cousin, Large Professor.
Aha.
Paulie, yeah. Paulie was actually working on the Rakim album.
Yeah.
And Eric B. When I first met Nas, I met Nas when I was like 16, 17. He came over one day with his friends. Like, I didn't even let them in. I was like, Van, somebody's at the door. And that was the first time he saw me. And he said, like, that was like love at first sight for him. So fast forward about 3 or 4 years later, Paulie was working on Nas's album,
Illmatic.
And he was also working on Akinele's album. So it was like kind of like always this group at my mom's house, which my mom left the apartment to my brother. So that's pretty much like where everything took place in Flushing, apartment 7C. So Nas came through with Akinele and the rest of them, and we were introduced by Paulie, and that's how we met. And it was just like on from there.
Now, at the time, Nas was called Kid Wave?
No.
No.
It was called Nasty Nas.
Nasty Nas.
Nasty Nas. I don't remember the Kid Wave thing. That might have been like...
Before you.
Yeah, the
Okay.
very before, because, yeah, that would have been...
He was already Nasty Nas at this point.
Nasty Nas. Mm-hmm.
Now, was this before Live at the Barbecue and some of his earlier appearances?
This was after Live at the Barbecue.
Okay.
Because Live at the Barbecue is what kind of really put him on the map. He was working on his album at Columbia. He was signed through Faith Newman.
Mm-hmm.
So Faith was able to get him on the Barbecue track via Search. Search was managing him at the time, and he had like a little label situation with him. So when Live at the Barbecue hit, that's when he was like, oh, who's this hot kid? Like, he sounds like Rakim, he's super lyrical, super talented. At the same time, he was working on his album. So like that came first, which was a great thing for him because it set up the album, which was highly anticipated and a classic to this day.
100%.
That's my favorite album of all time.
Yeah,
Illmatic.
It's in my top 5. Mm-hmm. Top, of any genre. Illmatic, right. I think, was a masterpiece.
It was, and he worked really hard on that album, and it took a long time to complete.
I bet.
Yeah, I mean, I had A&R at Sony calling me like, Carmen, can you just get him to finish this last song so we can get him out? Like, okay, I'll try.
So you meet Nas. He already has his buzz going.
Little buzz.
Mm-hmm. And does he have his record deal for Illmatic yet or no?
He had a record deal for Illmatic when I met him, but he didn't have any advance.
Okay.
Like like I said, it took him so long to complete this album. It took him like 2 years.
Okay.
So that advance was gone like maybe the first 6 months. And then I came into the picture, and that's when he started working a little bit harder towards completing the album. I was working at Def Jam. he had this deal. So it was kind of like we were both into music and just, trying to make our way as young, budding, 20-year-olds in New York City. So I think we both kind of like inspired each other as far as like the music was concerned.
So were you actually sitting in on the sessions for Illmatic?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I was in sessions pregnant, falling asleep on the couch, like, getting up 6, 7 o'clock in the morning and just going straight to work.
Okay. So from the point that you guys met up again and he already has a record deal, do you guys start dating right away?
Okay, so yes, we started dating immediately. Like once we met, we were automatically like, okay, we go together. 2 weeks later, Nas, I think, even proposed to me. So yes, we were definitely connected. We were a match almost instantly. And it was so natural. It wasn't even, it was mutual on both ends. And like it was just very organic, to say the least, very organic.
Okay. And how long after that do you actually get pregnant?
I got pregnant, I believe, like 9 months after we hooked up. And about 9 months to a year. It wasn't a long time that we were together before we decided to have a child.
So you guys decided?
Oh, no, yeah, Destiny was planned.
Was planned? Mm-hmm. Okay. How did Nas react when you told him that you were pregnant?
He was very excited, very happy. Nas actually named Destiny. Like, he had the name all set up. His friend, he had a friend, and they both said, okay, when we have children, we're going to name them both Destiny. And that ended up happening. And the funny thing about that is I had a best friend. And when I was about 14 or 15, we both agreed that when we had children, if we had a daughter first, we would name our daughter's Destiny. So there's like 4 Destinies running around right now based on like 14 and 15-year-olds promising their best friends that they were going to name their daughter's Destiny.
Gotcha.
So.
And you're how old at the time?
When I had Destiny?
No, when you got pregnant.
21.
21. And Nas is the same age?
20.
20.
I'm a year older than Nas.
So you guys are really kids at this point.
No, we were children. We know what we were doing, yeah.
I mean, technically adults, but not really.
We were having so much fun, but the thing is, we thought we were so grown. Mm-hmm. I feel younger now than I did when I was 21. When I was 21, I was walking around like I was 37 years old. Like I'm just so grown, and my shit is all the way together.
Okay.
And it wasn't, but it felt like it was.
So you guys are now together. You're pregnant, and Nas is starting to finish up Illmatic.
Yes.
Now, I've talked about this before. Illmatic was kind of different because up until this point, you always had a rapper / DJ producer team. You know what I'm saying? Eric B. and Rakim.
Yes.
Boogie Down Productions, Scott LaRock and KRS-One. Like
Heavy D, Eddie F.
Heavy D, and his producer. I mean, Marley Marl had his group of the Juice Crew. He was producing for the Juice Crew.
Even Kane had like his.
Yeah.
He always had a crew, Scoob and Scrap.
Yeah, well, those are the dancers.
Well, so but they were still always always
but
together.
With Nas's album, with Illmatic, I feel he had the first super producer album.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Where, right now it's kind of common. When you have the hottest rapper, he's going to get the hottest beats from all the hottest producers. Of course. But Nas was the first one to do that in terms of all the hottest East Coast producers.
Right.
So he had an album that had Large Professor, Q-Tip, Pete Rock, DJ Premier. Mm-hmm. Oh, who am I missing?
Was Akinelli on there anywhere?
Not as a producer.
No. Okay.
And LES, that was the in-house producer.
LES, yes.
Right, but everyone else, he had the hottest dudes at the time come in and bring what I felt was their hottest beats.
Definitely, and honestly, that was based on his own talent. These people loved working with him because he would take their track and just massacre it. And any DJ, any producer, that creates this frequency of music, these vibrations, based on feelings and thought, they appreciate that coming from another artist. I know when I hear tracks, versus tracks that I'm not really interested in, it's a different kind of feeling. It inspires me in a totally different way. So I think that it was a great collective effort on both parties to create those songs in such a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, With the Genesis, he actually took the intro from Wild Style.
Wild Style.
Yeah. What was that idea behind that?
I think, Nas is the type of person that does a lot of research before he attacks anything, any type of project. We have that in common. And he goes back and he does his due diligence. And it's always in the details. It's always the little things that, mean the most. And when it comes to music, he actually does that. Nas is just not that artist that's just going to get up and go into the booth and just haphazardly, lay a couple of vocals down. He can if he chooses to. He can freestyle. But I think he takes a lot more time. He actually thinks about the listener. Like I've watched him write. I've watched him listen to tracks, and he really considers the people that he's lending his voice to when it comes to him creating.
So Illmatic is finally done. Mm-hmm. It gets released, and it just goes crazy.
Oh, it was insane when Illmatic. I felt like I just dropped an album. I swear. I mean, my whole family was so excited for Nas. His whole family, all of his friends, my entire circle. We were all rooting for him. It was a big day for Nas. It was a big day for Queens. It was a big day for Queensbridge.
Oh yeah.
Nas is huge in Queensbridge, and he's always been, like that popular guy in the projects. And the crazy thing is when I was pregnant, at the very end of my pregnancy, we had some issues at 7C. So we had to move, and we ended up staying with Nas's mom in the projects because I was so pregnant. I was about to give birth. We were in like this transition stage. And it was just best that, we just stayed local. I was still working. He was still in the studio. So moving to Queensbridge Projects for 2 months, that was a life-changing experience.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing to ever come out of Queensbridge.
Yeah, yes.
Point blank, period.
Yeah, and just living in the projects is a different experience within itself, just as a regular person. And I was wowed by it, and even, more, I admired him just a little bit more, like, wow, you've gone through all these trials and tribulations, and, we don't all come from stellar environments. I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, in the hood, but I grew up in a house, and my grandparents had, you know what I mean? It was a little bit different. But this was really, like, hood stuff going on.
Because there was a documentary that I saw about Nas, and they showed the picture, the inside cover of Nas in the Queensbridge projects with all of his friends. And they started going through the list, and it's like dead, life in prison, dead, 40 years in prison, dead, prison, dead. Like almost every single person in that picture is either dead or in prison.
When the 2 months that I lived there, that we lived there, 4 of his friends had gotten shot, and 1 actually died. I believe he got shot in the leg, and then it was like a shock thing. But I mean, just to have so many tragedies in such a small period of time, that was overwhelming for me because I was pregnant. It was extremely overwhelming for him because he was working on his album and, trying to transition into a totally different lifestyle. But at the same time, this was still relevant, the things that were going on in the projects. His mother still lived there, his brothers still lived there, like we were living there, even though we were about to transition into another home in Long Island. He couldn't separate himself from, the lifestyles. You can go home and drive to Long Island and get on the highway, but then this is what keeps you relevant. This is what you're talking about. This is what you're rapping about. This is what you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis because this is the environment you choose to be in. And I couldn't understand it in the beginning, like, well, why don't you just leave the projects and just never go back? And, that's like saying to someone, why don't you just leave Jamaica, Queens and never go back? You are where you're, you live where you live. You're brought up in these environments and you deal with it the best way you can. And it either makes or breaks you. And in this case, I think it really just made him, especially when you look back at all the people who didn't make it.
Yeah. So Illmatic comes out. It goes crazy. everyone is feeling it across the board. Where are you guys relationship wise at this point? You guys, Destiny was born at this point?
No, Destiny, she wasn't born yet. I didn't have her until June. Illmatic, I believe, came out a few months before her, before I gave birth to her. But we were in a great place. We were in a great space. We were excited. Like I said, I felt like I was dropping an album as well. This was like his first project, and he worked so hard on it for so long, and everyone was waiting for it. Everyone. It was like one of the most anticipated albums of that era, so to speak, and people had a lot of expectations, and I think that he fulfilled, all those expectations and then some.
Yeah.
I was really happy for him, and I knew at that point, he was going to definitely be an icon in this thing we call hip hop.
So the album comes out, you have your baby, and then where are you guys relationship?
And then the money started rolling in.
The money starts rolling in, of course, because the record sale starts happening, the show
Shows
money,
coming.
everything.
I mean, people want to invest now, and back then when they did the soundtracks, the song was really about the movie, so it was a bigger check, so to speak. I think there was like a little bit more money to be made.
Oh, yeah.
Back then. I mean, social media is bigger and it lends more opportunities, but I think back then,
people were buying
because
albums
we weren't
back
so
then.
oversaturated. Exactly, people were buying albums. They weren't
physical
downloading and
CDs.
streaming. Exactly.
So back then, if you heard a hot song, you usually had to buy the whole album.
Exactly.
So
right.
Because sometimes they wouldn't even release a single. You'd have to buy the whole album. That's how
right.
MC Hammer did it. But yeah.
And so people were actually purchasing music at this particular time. So the money was rolling in.
Okay.
And Nas is super generous, and he's very caring. He's loving. He took care of everybody. Took care of his mom. Made sure his brother was okay. Took care of his family, and then he went on tour.
Okay.
And that was a rough time for me because I was a new mom. I was going through postpartum depression. I didn't even know what that was. And even though I had a lot of help from family and friends, it was still an internal process that I was experiencing. And it was rough. It was rough. And I do remember a few times, like, I broke down and Nas would come off the road, make sure we were okay, make sure we were good, and then go back out and work. And he worked really, really hard that first album.
So at what point did the relationship start to go south?
The relationship started to go south years later, like after, I would say, years of arguing and fighting and not seeing eye to eye. And also at this time, I was transitioning and I was evolving spiritually. So my desires were changing, my taste in men change, or things were just changing for me. I was growing, I was evolving, I was becoming this different person, and the lifestyle that Nas and I were living and the relationship, it was no longer conducive to my evolution. And there was so many fights and so many things that have happened, and I just felt like, I just want to start over anew. We were dragging the relationship. At least I felt like I was, for the sake of being in a relationship, for the sake of Destiny. We had small breakups here and there. We were engaged to be married. We, moved several times, went on vacation. We did anything we could possibly do to save the relationship, at the very end when it was about to crumble. And then that last time, it was just there was nothing saving it. It was just, I had to go.
You started seeing other men.
I started seeing other people while we were in the relationship.
Okay.
Ironically, I didn't see anybody after the relationship because it wasn't the same feeling.
Okay.
And I know that's difficult to explain, but when I was in the relationship, Nas was cheating, I was cheating. We were both, young. We had desires. We were experiencing other people. And I learned in a short amount of time that the way you feel about one person has nothing to do with the way you feel about another person. At the end of the day, love is all there is. There's two emotions that a human being can experience at any given time: love and fear. Everything else is derivatives of the two.
Right.
So I was just in a place like, okay, my boyfriend is this hot rapper. We have all this money. We have cars, jewelry, clothes. Like, there's nothing that I desire material-wise, but I was empty inside. I didn't have the love, the nurturing, the attention that I used to get from him. And I probably wasn't giving the same in return. Like, I think it was a 50-50 thing. I had a lot of expectations when Nas became this megastar. I probably could have been a little bit more understanding. We were young and we were just growing. So he was cheating. I was cheating. The problem was, this is where the problem came in. The problem was who I was cheating with. Now, had I been cheating with like some nobody who just wants to play Nintendo all day and smoke cigarettes in front of the TV, that may not have been a problem. Like, okay, you know what, Carmen, we can get through that. We can get past that. We can't see him anymore, but we can get through that. But I was cheating with individuals that were in the same genre of music, the same circles, the same company. But I didn't look at it as if I was doing anything wrong. I felt like this is my circle too. These are my peers too. Like I'm in the box too. So it is what it is.
And who are those people?
I had a relationship with Jay Z. But the thing about Jay Z and I, we were friends before anything. That was my best friend before we became intimate, before we became lovers to any extent, before anything physical happened between us. That was my friend. And we were really good friends. And I enjoyed our friendship. And I have absolutely no regrets. And, it was what it was.
So you're friends with Jay Z, and then at one point it turns romantic.
After a year.
After a year.
After about a year and some change, as things change. Yeah.
And this was Jay Z during which album? I mean, Reasonable Doubt was already out.
This was Reasonable. I met Jay Z right after he dropped Reasonable Doubt.
Right.
Reasonable Doubt was out like a minute because I remember like, oh, what's this? Who's this? Oh, I like this song. And then I met him through a friend at a party. And the next day, Nas and I got into like some big fight, and he pissed me off. And so I just thought, let me call Jay Z. What's going on with him?
Okay. Now, Jay Z's first single sampled Nas on the hook, Dead Presidents.
Yes.
So there's already this interesting connection between Jay Z and Nas from the jump.
Right. But you know how I looked at that? I looked at, oh, that's the producer who sampled it. I didn't look at it. I didn't honestly see the correlation in the very beginning. Like, I didn't even think twice, like, oh, well, these two might.
Okay. But Jay Z knew that you had a daughter with Nas.
Yes, he did. He was aware of that.
He was aware of that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you guys are messing around. You and Nas are getting into problems, are having problems with your relationship.
Yes.
At what point does Takeover come out?
Takeover came out. I had already left Nas.
Okay.
I had already broken up with him. I shipped all of my things to LA. I moved. I packed Destiny and I up. We were already out. So when that came about, Nas and I were not together. We were not in a relationship. We were still going back and forth like couples do who immediately break up. We were still seeing each other. It wasn't like the relationship was, completely null and void. That's difficult. You know what I mean? It takes a little bit of time to get over someone you've been in a relationship with for a decade. So I'm not going to say we weren't still intimate and seeing each other, but we weren't living together and we were not in a relationship. Takeover came when Takeover actually is a product of Jay Z just being emotional. That's the honest truth.
Okay, well, I interviewed Memphis Bleek when Jay and Nas were going at it. How did you feel about that?
I started that drama, so what you mean how I feel about it? I felt like I got my big homie in some shit. It's going down out here in these New York streets. We gotta hold it down.
I know the Memphis Bleek story, and honestly, I feel sorry for Memphis Bleek because he got thrown in there like some kind of pawn. For him to think that he would be the cause of, you know, a rap battle that has gone down in history between the biggest hip-hop icons in the world, that's a terrible mistake on his part. And I feel bad for him because his whole entire career was ruined as a result of him trying to even take a shot at Nas. And I blame Jay-Z for that because he pushed him out there to do that. Like, it was like testing the waters, so to speak. Like, I'm just gonna let you go and, you know, feel this situation out, and let's just see, you know, what happens. And what happened was he got his head taken off immediately. And everyone in the industry, that's anyone, Steve Stout included, we all agreed that was a bad move on Jay's part, and Memphis Bleek did not deserve that.
Okay. But there's another story. You feel you were the cause of the beef between the two of them?
Well, here's my question. If I wasn't, then what was? That's the question I have to everybody, because everyone seems to ask me that question, and I'm the only one who has the answer to it.
Okay.
If you ask Nas, if you ask Jay-Z, they're never going to answer that question.
So what is your answer to this?
I'm the reason why they had
Okay. Was
that
there a
beef.
specific thing that happened?
No, there was no specific thing. It's just like in any relationship, when you're dating more than one person, there's a number of things that happen. There were so many things that happened that no one was aware of. You know, phones being snatched, calls being made, texts going back and forth between people. All of those things weren't divulged in the songs. These are things that were taking place behind the scene. Memphis Bleek was thrown as like a dart at Nas to just, you know, spark a flame, to, you know, shed a little bit of blood just to see what was going to happen on the other end.
At one point, you were pregnant by Jay?
Yes, I had a miscarriage.
Okay, this is before the whole
This is,
takeover.
this is like
Okay.
before all of that.
How far along were you?
I believe I was definitely less than 3 months. It was the first
Okay. It was
trimester.
still-
Yeah, it wasn't.
It was still early.
Exactly. Yeah, it wasn't anything
Okay.
crazy. It wasn't planned. It wasn't like, oh, we're gonna have this baby and, you know, move forward with our relationship. No.
Okay. When you told Jay that you were pregnant, what was his reaction?
I told him after the fact.
Oh, you told him after?
I told him
you
after
miscarried.
the
Okay,
fact.
so he didn't even know.
No, I
Okay.
told him after the fact.
So, Takeover comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that what, Nas and Jay were already sort of communicating with each other in a way?
The beef was already brewing. It was on, if you listen to mixtapes, you know, radio, interviews. We have social media now, so, you know,
Right.
you can see people throwing shade. Back then, you couldn't really see it. You had to listen out for it and just be aware of it. But the beef had started way before the songs dropped.
Okay, because I'd heard, Is That Your Chick was about you?
Yeah, and here's the thing. It was, but it wasn't. That was Jay-Z. Like, again, Jay-Z is a very subliminal
Right.
type. You know what I mean? He throws little, see, me, I don't throw shade. I pick up the whole fucking tree and swing. That's just me. That's just me.
Okay.
But, you know, he's that character, like, let me just throw a little, I'm going to tease you here and there. I'm going to, you know.
Okay. So the two of them were already beefing with each other. And
Way
then,
before
But
this-
Jay made it public with
Right.
Takeover.
Jay made it public with Takeover.
Okay. Takeover comes out, and it's a big deal.
It was a big deal. And that was a good song. We're not going to front on
Takeover's
the
dope.
song.
Takeover is dope.
We're not gonna front on the song.
Wait, were you mentioning Takeover or no?
Sort of, kind of. My name
kinda.
wasn't mentioned, but there was, like, again, you know, the
Yeah.
subliminals at the end, the little, you know, the little things that Jay-Z does.
Okay. Once Takeover came out, did you and Nas have a conversation about it?
Nas called me immediately.
Okay. What was
Again,
that
like
phone-
I said, we weren't even together.
What was that phone call like?
It was in the middle of the night for sure. It had to be like 3 o'clock in the morning my time. And honestly, I didn't even know what he was saying. I was half asleep and I couldn't really understand it. And I was like, I got to hear the song to really, you know, internalize what's going on so I can give you a sincere reaction. So it wasn't until the next day that I was able to absorb everything that was going on, assess it, and then have a conversation with him about it. And once I realized what Jay was doing, I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna allow him to belittle Nas anymore. Like, I'm the only person on the planet that could belittle this nigga. I'm not letting anybody else have that opportunity. And so I just called Nas, like, all right, let's talk. So I had a conversation with Nas like any attorney would have with their client.
Okay.
And I just basically told him, listen, if you want to win this case, you're going to have to go this route. Because I knew what type of person Jay Z was. Jay Z is he can be insecure. He has a little bit of low self-esteem in certain areas. And he's sensitive. And I kind of knew what areas, you know, we all have sensitivities. We all have, you know, things about us that we don't necessarily want the public to know about. And I told Nas, this is your opportunity to do whatever you need to do, but you have to do it all in one song. Like all of this subliminal drop and mix, just rock this nigga and let's move on.
Okay. And then that became Ether.
And that became Ether. I told Nas everything that transpired between Jay Z and I so that he could write the song consciously knowing what could come back as far as like, you know, a rebuttal. And I told Nas basically, I've done everything with him that a man has done with his mother and his sister, his nieces, you know, like we're human beings. I'm a woman, he's a man. Like to think that, you know, I'm on this pedestal and like I'm not. I'm a human being. I'm like a regular woman. I have desires, I have needs. And this was my best friend. Like this was Jay Z and I were really, really good friends. And don't get me wrong, I felt for him as well, but I also felt like, nigga, you started this.
Okay, so did you and Jay have a conversation?
Yes, we did. And I told him to chill out.
And what did he say?
I told him to relax. This is what I said. I said, listen, because again, I was evolving spiritually. I said, right now, we are experiencing opportunities to become better people. We have to start making choices. Our reactions are everything right now, moving forward. We could really set the precedent for a whole new era moving forward in music. So I really felt like this was an exercise for us to just be who we could possibly be. You know, I wanted to be the greatest and grandest version of the vision that I saw for myself in that moment. But neither one of them weren't on my level at that point. You know what I mean? They weren't on my vibration. They weren't on my frequency. So I did have this conversation with both of them. I told Jay to chill out, and he didn't. And then I just told, nah, you know what, do what you gotta do.
Okay.
Because this nigga will not chill.
So Nas drops Ether. Did you hear Ether before it dropped?
No, I didn't hear it before it dropped. I heard it on the radio like everybody else. Nas and I heard it in the kitchen together on the radio.
Oh.
Okay, so we weren't together, but like I said, we had a child in common. So we were still around. I was in New York at the time. I felt like he needed me to be there in lieu of this battle, in lieu of this beef. It was like, okay, well, I still got the girl, and she's over here with me, and I'm about to drop this song and dead everything. That was the plan, and it worked.
How does Nas feel about it?
Oh, we were so excited when that song dropped on, I believe it was Hot 97. Funk Master Flex, you know, he's a clown. I mean, he just kept, the bombs just kept, New York City, New York City. It was a great time in Long Island. It was, Nas was there, Horace was there, Bart Jungle was there, my daughter was there. I think my best friend Renette was there. First of all, the song was fire. Can't deny the song.
Yeah.
And I've never known Nas to be a battle MC, you know? But if you know Nas, you know that Nas is witty. He's hilarious. He's like a comedian. And I agree 100% with Steve Stout when Steve Stout told Jay Z, listen, you don't want to go there with Nas. He just looks like this. But he's a totally different character beneath it all. And that's so true about him. Like, you have no idea like how much character Nas really has behind that character.
Right. So Ether comes out. Everyone's going crazy.
On
over
fire. The whole Queensbridge, the whole Queens. I mean, people were
all
blasting it through
all
the
of
window.
hip hop.
New York City.
New
the
York,
whole New York
West
City.
Coast,
The whole,
everyone was fucking with it. And then Jay Z dropped Super Ugly.
Yes.
Now, Super Ugly, at this point, I feel like the kid gloves were off. And it was just like every man for himself, no holds barred. Mm-hmm. So he, in the second part, he said, I came in your Bentley backseat, skeeted in your Jeep, left condoms on your baby seat.
Well, first of all, when Super Ugly came out and we heard it, everybody was like, you corny. Oh my, that was such an emotional reaction. And then number two, Destiny was like 8, 9 years old when Super Ugly came out. So what car seat is she sitting in at 9, 10 years old? Jay-Z's never been in any of our vehicles. So, that was just him just grasping at things and just trying to, make an instant comeback. But even the next day when he got on a radio station at Hot 97, he was disheveled. It sounded like he was about to cry. He wasn't sure where he was going with the story. His mother called in, made him apologize. It just wasn't, Super Ugly was not a well thought out plan. And I believe in hindsight that he regretted ever dropping that song. In fact, I know for a fact he regret dropping it because we have a mutual friend who told me that. He said, I wish I never would have dropped that song.
Well, when you look at the all-time great diss songs, Super Ugly doesn't usually get mentioned. It's Takeover.
It was an emotional reaction.
Takeover gets mentioned, Ether gets mentioned, and
right.
Bridge is Over gets mentioned, Hit 'Em Up gets mentioned.
Right. It was an
But
emotional
not Super
reaction.
Ugly. Not Super Ugly.
It was an emotional reaction to an ass whooping. That's all it was.
But he mentions you by name in this song. Mm-hmm. And he also alludes to your daughter, Destiny. Mm-hmm. He doesn't say Destiny in the actual verse, but he's talking about you and Nas's daughter.
And you know what's so crazy about that? Now he has a daughter. And social media is a beast. And, back then when he made these disparaging remarks and comments about my daughter and created this disgusting visual, there were so many people around him that stayed quiet. They said absolutely nothing. And sometimes when you don't pick a side, you kind of pick a side, you know what I mean? I'm a totally different person. Had Nas said something like that about their child, all hell would have broke loose. I would not, as a woman, I would not have stood by any man that disrespects children and drags them into adult affairs. Children don't really have a voice. We're here. We are their mini gods. We're here to protect them against the world. I thought that was a sucker move, and I thought anybody that was around him that condoned that, I thought they were suckers too.
Allen Iverson gets thrown into this whole situation.
And then they're going to drag Allen in. Poor Allen. Like, as if he didn't have enough going on in his own world with his own life and situations.
Okay. Any truth to the Allen story?
Allen and I, we were friends. We did date off and on. We did see each other. But it had absolutely nothing to do with the beef between Jay-Z and Nas. I don't even know why he pulled that in there. But I do know for a fact that when Jay-Z went to Philadelphia shortly after that song dropped and Allen saw him in a club, I do know that Allen stepped to him about that. That was a problem for Allen. That wasn't like, oh, hey, yeah, give me. No. It was like, nigga, don't be pulling my name in your bullshit. Like, why would you drop my name? Keep my name out of that.
After Super Ugly came out, everyone pretty much gave it to Ether.
Yeah.
Ether
yeah,
got it.
Yeah.
I like Takeover, but most people
As a
say Ether.
song.
As a song, I like
As a
Takeover,
song.
right?
As a song.
But everyone pretty much liked Ether.
As a
Nas
battle.
was essentially crowned as the winner of the Jay Z Nas beef.
Right. I mean, listen, Nas turned the word ether
Into a verb.
Verb and
you
shit.
Can get ethered.
Like, you got, exactly.
Yeah, don't make me ether you.
Don't
yeah.
right. And then you see what happened with the Nicki Minaj and the Remy
Sheether. Right. No, I mean, Ether will go down as an all-time classic diss song.
Definitely.
100%.
Definitely.
So after this whole situation, you and Nas are no longer together?
Right. Mm-hmm. We're still in contact, but we're not together.
Did you have a conversation with Jay about Super Ugly?
No.
No. Never.
Nope. That was it after that.
No more talking.
Well, here's the thing. After Takeover, I had a conversation with him, and then I just felt like, you're not hearing me. And then it was like my loyalty at all times lay with Nas. Like, at the end of the day, it was him and I against the world, especially when he decided to put Ether out. Ether came out months after Takeover, like 5 or 6 months.
It took a while.
It took a minute.
Yeah.
It took a minute because there were things that were happening. Nas's mom wasn't doing too good. We weren't together. Nas was transitioning from one home to the next. He was working on his album. He decided to include the Ether song as a part of the album so he could go on the road with it. And I will say this, there was a lot of money being made over this beef. During it, before it, after it.
Right.
People are still commercializing. Yeah.
Because Rockefeller went on to do a bunch of other songs where other members jumped on. I think Cameron was on a song and Freeway was on a song.
Cameron, all of them.
And so forth. All of this was happening. You have something to say about Cameron?
You know what? I have no respect for Cameron. I think he's a total douchebag. Honestly, I don't even want to talk about him.
Wait a minute. He had, right, because Cameron had the verse about your daughter.
I was referring to what he said about Nas's mom, who had passed away. He made very disparaging comments about her. What he said about Destiny and I was like, oh, you clown. Monkey see, monkey do. I could care less.
He said, R. Kelly, your daughter's face or something like that?
I don't remember exactly what he said, but he has some really negative things to say. Cameron's a clown. He's a douchebag. He's disgusting. He's illiterate and he can't rhyme to save his life. And he's not even worth me talking about, to be honest with you.
Well, he actually didn't have anything to do with this beef. He just was on Rockefeller.
Let me tell you something. Cameron been a Nas dick rider from jump. Cameron always sweating Nas. Cameron used to try to get into my girl circles just to get close to Nas. That's how desperate and pathetic he was.
Right. He said, tell your daughter R. Kelly have my way with her face. And how old was your daughter at the time?
She had to be like 7 or 8 years old at that time. Yeah,
that's way over the line.
Yeah, somebody should have stomped him out immediately after that. Well, I know for a fact that when he got on the radio and was spewing this bullshit, the studio I was in, the whole entire studio, jumped in their cars and ran to the city. But he was gone by that time.
Right. Cameron called Nas's dead mother a whip wop head.
Something like he said something about her wig or something to that effect. I believe, but I'll be honest with you. I was totally fulfilled when 50 destroyed Cameron. I was like, okay, I feel so much better. Like I was fine after that. Like, you know, I felt like he got his karma when 50 came on the scene.
Okay, so all this.
Then he was no longer a part of hip hop.
All this happened. You know, it eventually started to die down. Mm-hmm. You fast forward a number of years, and Jay Z actually signs Nas to Def Jam.
I know, right? That was crazy. Now you won the battle, but you lost the war.
You felt that Nas lost the war.
Absolutely. 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 He won the battle, but at the very end, you gave in. You know, like, who doesn't stand for their own cause? Like, if you're not going to back your own cause, then...
And they ended up doing a song together. Black Republicans, produced by LES. Coincidentally.
Right.
Just kind of cool.
So long ago. I know, it was just such a long time ago.
Okay. And you felt that Nas lost the war.
Okay, well, what happened was when Jay-Z lost the battle and the whole entire New York City felt like Ether was a better track and, you know, Jay-Z was feeling a certain type of way. We all know Jay-Z has a huge ego, you know what I mean? He's like a monster in music. He was feeling a certain type of way. So I guess he may have felt like, okay, well, you know what? If I can't beat him, I'll join him. At the very least, let me get this nigga on my team so that the whole world doesn't think that, hey, here we are beefing over this one little girl. Like, God forbid that, you know, be the news story. And so what happened was I think they both agreed, like, all right, let's just take a moment, gather our thoughts, let's unite, do this song, and we'll just use this whole front to camouflage, you know, what's really going on, because we are artists, we're hip hop artists, and we're on stage every day and we're in videos and we have groupies, and God forbid anybody think that we are fighting over her and beefing over her with all that we have going on and blah, blah, blah. And so that's what happened. Nas was going through some financial issues.
Right,
Jay had a checkbook ready.
Right, he had tax problems.
He had some tax issues.
Right.
And honestly, those tax issues, they came from him just having poor management,
Right.
poor accountants, poor...
Right. But to be fair, Nas is someone that's going to continue to be able to make money forever.
Oh, definitely.
So it's not like his problems were so bad that, you know, he couldn't get out of it.
Oh, no.
You know, Nas could tour all over the planet in damn near every country and sell it out. So...
But you cannot get around the IRS. There's nothing you can do.
No, but I'm saying, but he could make money in order to pay back the IRS. He didn't have to sign with Jay. That was not his only option.
Well, that's true. That's absolutely true. But again, like I said, they needed to camouflage what was going on with me. So it just made sense for them to get together, because then it would make it less likely for someone to believe that they were beefing over me. And that was the priority. These people, you have to understand, these artists build themselves up, you know, to this image, you know, and they have to stay there in order to maintain relevancy, to maintain their stardom. You know, they can't be like regular people who fall in love and have feelings and emotions.
Now, you fast forward to 2017. I remember we had posted a picture of Nas and Destiny meeting with Obama at the White House.
Oh, my baby. Yes.
That was a dope picture, by the way. Just a very cool.
I did her whole outfit.
Oh, did you? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. People were commenting on her shoes.
Her shoes, everything.
So, how's everyone's relationship now between you, Nas, his daughter?
Everything is the same. The problem is we don't update the public with the status of our relationship every time there's a shift or a change. So they just hold on to the last thing they've heard in the media. You know what I mean? So people will say, oh, are they speaking? And then my question, well, who told you we weren't speaking? Oh, you didn't get the email because you weren't involved in the situation. But everything's pretty much the same. Honestly, we're still cordial. We still get along. If there's an issue with Destiny, I'm still going to curse you out. I mean, that's it. When I go at Nas about anything, it's always about Destiny. I guarantee you. Always, always, always. If you do your research and you funnel, she's right there. That's it. Otherwise, we get along great. Otherwise, there's no problems.
Like, how was Destiny, in terms of her point of view, having someone like Nas as her father?
Oh, she loves her dad. She admires him. I think she really, really likes being a celebrity kid. But at the same time, she feels like she has a lot to live up to as far as his expectations of her. She feels like she really needs to be successful financially, career-wise. She feels like she needs to be on that level to be successful, you know, to reach his level. She really admires her dad.
You actually dropped a new music video.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Have you put out other music before this?
Well, like I told you before, I was in a group. First of all, I was in a rap group like when I was a teenager. And then I was in a singing group about 10 years ago. I even mentioned in my book going to Italy with a band. And but you know what? I'm just not a group person. I don't like to vote. I just like to do things my way. And I'm a creative person, and I just like to produce when I'm ready to produce and do things how I like to do it. So the group thing just didn't really work out for me too good.
Okay, but you put out a solo.
Yes, I put out a
song.
solo song. I'm actually putting out a solo project. It's an EP titled Carmen, and my first single is called Oh No No, Oh No No No. We just did a video for it, dropped it on iTunes, and I'm excited. I'm excited about
Okay.
it.
Is Nas going to be featured on it?
We'll see. We have some things working in
Okay.
behind the scenes, so that might be a nice little remix.
And how old is Destiny now?
22.
22. Okay, so at 18, Nas stopped paying child support.
No,
No?
he stopped paying at about maybe 20.
At 20. Okay, 'cause she went to college?
Yes.
Okay, and then certain states you have to
Right.
pay until college.
Right. And then she stopped going to college, is what happened.
Oh, and he stopped paying child
Right.
support. Okay. Did your life change a lot when Nas stopped supporting Destiny financially?
Not really. Not really, because I wasn't getting a whole lot of money in child support anyway. I was able to move around a little bit more because at that point, Destiny got her own apartment, her own car, and she could do her own thing. And then I was able to go back and forth from New York to LA. I have like a bunch of shows. I'm really like a creative, productive type of person. So I was flying back and forth, shopping shows, just really setting up my situation. The EP, looking for tracks, finding writers, recording. I mean, this whole thing just took a minute, like, because I had to do it all on my own. No label, no production companies, just everything was on me. So it was like a gift and a curse, the child support situation. Mm-hmm. Anyone who gets child support, you know it's not going to last forever anyway. And when you're getting a check every month, I don't know, sometimes you become a little bit content with that. You don't necessarily, some people don't want to go above and
Yeah.
beyond that.
No, I mean,
you
I've
know?
seen a lot of women when they get pregnant by an athlete or
Mm-hmm.
an entertainer or whatever, they just pretty much just take care of the kid
and, then,
and
right.
not really do anything else because in their mind, well, I can go get a job, but the amount I'm going to make from
That's,
this job is nowhere near what I'm making in child support, you know, in
Right.
terms of the overall situation. Why bother?
but that's if you're thinking in terms of you making money. Child support is not an income for you. It's supposed to support the child.
Right.
You
But
know what I mean?
when someone with a lot of money does have a child and does have child support, the child is expected to have a similar living situation
Exactly.
as the richer parent.
Oh,
basically.
definitely.
You know, you can't be in a mansion when you go visit dad
Right.
and then go to the projects back home with mom. You know what I'm
They
saying?
should have it the same lifestyle. that
Exactly,
they're-
which
that
I
you're
agree with,
accustomed to.
actually.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
The only people that complain about child support are the people that are not getting child support.
But you had child support.
Yes. I'm not complaining.
You're not complaining about child support.
I'm not. You know, it came in handy. I was able to stay home with my daughter,
Yeah.
like I always wanted to do. There may have been 5 times in Destiny's entire life that I didn't take her to school and pick her up.
Wow.
5 times.
So you became a full-time mom.
Oh yeah, that was my first dream in life was to be a mother. Most little girls, the first thing you ever desire in life is to be a mom. And then you figure, do I want a little girl or do I want a little boy? So that was like my first dream accomplished. I did that. I'm very happy with her. She's beautiful. She's perfect. She's going to be a great actress. She's an aspiring actress. She has her own business, Illmatic.
Yeah.
She's like my budding little star.
That's what's up. That's what's up. Well, Carmen, definitely appreciate your story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
No doubt.